Okay, so Martin Couzins and
Mike Morrison.
we're at CIPD Show, L&D Show rather, 2017, and we've both just been to the same session. So
We've not done that this year. This
No.
is the first.
so go on, Mike. Tell us where we've been.
Where have we been? We was in the session on making analytics work. So what is analytics? What is evaluation? And how can we actually make it work? We had two speakers there, Jack Phillips, who I learned of first long before I heard of Kirkpatrick in the evaluation world, and Darren Glee from EDF. So, Martin, what are your sort of thoughts?
I don't know whether I'm just a massive cynic in this area. So I'm sorry about. I apologise now for what I'm about to say, but there's something about this that kind of makes me think of the problem with the training needs analysis is that the outcome of that is training, and there's something about this whole ROI around the Kirkpatrick model that rather suggests that all you're doing is measuring the training because the training was the right thing to do, and it's kind of I think it's quite presumptuous. So what was interesting about what I just heard was so EDF did some e-learning, and the reaction to that e-learning was 50% of people didn't really like it.
No.
So my thinking there is, well, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do.
But the results were quite different.
Yeah, okay, but the thing is, so my issue is, what was the business problem and what did it really need? And that was not addressed, okay? So what they did do was they did the e-learning and then they ran it through the ROI process and it had wonderful stats and it worked really well for them. The problem for me is that is a justification for training, and the board will probably go, we should do that again. But the reaction to that in the first place was not great. So my concern is that company is now going to be rolling out potentially not very good e-learning, and still the ROI process and the reporting on it will say it did really well for them.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm a bit it strikes me that it should just, all this should be about is what is the performance issue? How do we know whether that's going to be successful, and then measure what you need to measure in terms of impact and the business impact. I think it's a lot simpler than what some of the process here is suggesting. But tell me I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong. I think there's a different angle. I think, we do a training needs analysis and we assume that it's about training stuff. I think we need to step back and do an organisational needs analysis, of which training is a part of that picture. Other bits will be management relationships, policies, various other things. So I think there's an element of that. So I think we need to legitimise that not all needs result in training. I think you're right there. I think what's interesting for me was the fact that people didn't like e-learning and it was the first time they'd done e-learning. And yet the real results in behaviour change were measurable, were palpable. So there's that conflict of people didn't like it, but it worked, allegedly. Yeah. That for me was an interesting one. I think you're right. What's the takeaway? How are they going to interpret that in the future? Oh, they didn't like it, but the bad medicine works anyway. Yeah. Is it going to be that, or do we need to sweeten the medicine? I don't know. I think for me, one of the messages that come out was that what EDF did do was that they included the evaluation criteria as part of the needs analysis. They set up front how they were going to measure it, rather than waiting until afterwards. Yeah. So I think that level of transparency is relatively new. There aren't that many people doing it, but I think that does make a big difference to what it is that we do and how we can add value. So in the training cycle, start thinking of the needs analysis as the evaluation. It's the same thing. Just start putting numbers on the analysis, and then just do the process again. So I think it's also back to basics. I think a lot of this stuff, a lot of people would have heard it as being new, but actually it's going back and going, are we doing the right stuff for the right reasons in the right way?
But I would add, I think it's important not to be seduced by training as being the answer. And I think this kind of process is set up to justify the fact that training is the answer. And I think it gets more complicated if the interventions might not be that. Yeah. So therefore, you've got to think, about how you do measure the impact of those interventions, and you'll probably use slightly different methods to do that. Anyway, I think it's an interesting area, and we could probably talk about this for a lot longer actually.
Probably, but we won't.
Let's leave it there. That's brilliant. Okay,
Thanks,
cheers,
Martin.